All right, hey everybody, Craig here. We're talking about 5 things that you need to know when you're moving to Norfolk, Virginia. So let's get started. All right, so I was talking to a friend of mine this morning, and he asked me, he said, hey, we're looking for a house. We went and we looked at the first one, and he says, hey, so we've got a pre-approval letter. What else do I need to do? And I thought, you know what a great point is that there's quite a few things that we need to do, and they've already gone through a few of them because we're already shopping for houses. But there's a lot more to it. So let's go through all the different things that we have to do in order to get to buying a house. And today we're going to make some assumptions. The assumption is that we are probably a first-time home buyer. We're buying for ourselves to actually live in it. That we've got the credit to actually get a loan. That if that's what we're going to do. If we were going to do this as an investment properly, like a rental or a fix and flip, we're going to do that in another day of how we go through that purchase process. So for today, the assumption is we are going to be living in it, and today we'll just assume we're a first-time home buyer. All right, so what do we need to do? 5 things. Number 1, first thing, what is the point? What is your why? Why are you buying a house today? So is it because you're leaving one place and moving to another? Great reason. Are you buying your forever home, or are you buying something just for the next 2 to 3 years? Do you really need a home office, 3-car garage, whatever the point is? Identify the real reason that you want to buy a house, because that's going to really determine the answers to all the rest of the questions. All right. So you got to determine that why. Tons of questions that we can ask to figure it out, but only you really know what those answers are. All right, so that's the first thing we need to do is figure out the why. What's the point? The second thing we're going to do is all about money. And so for the first step, we got to figure out what's our budget. So there's 3 different numbers when it comes to the budget. There's what you want to spend, what you can spend, and what you should spend. And those are 3 different things. And you might be approved for a loan of up to $500,000, and that's great, but you might not want to actually spend it. Maybe you only want to spend $400,000, or maybe only $200,000. Only you know the answer to those questions. I can help you figure out the answers to that. Your loan officer can help you figure that out. Maybe a financial planner or somebody else. The point though is that you will be approved for a loan up to a certain amount. You don't have to use it all, and maybe you don't want to, because if you use all of that available credit to buy the house, you may find yourself house poor, that you can't go out to eat anymore or put gas in the car. And maybe that's not what you necessarily want to do. So you got to figure out how much money does it take for your lifestyle, and then figure out the budget. How much can you spend on the house? And that's going to determine the house that you want to buy, assuming that you don't have any other surprise costs in there. All right. If that makes sense, that's great. If not, give me a call and we could talk about it a little bit more. So number 2, we're all talking about money. The first is budget, what you can spend, what you want to spend, and what you should spend. So once you're figuring that out and you know, okay, this is how much I can afford in the budget, now you're going to figure out, hey, I need to go get that loan. I need to talk to a loan officer, talk to a bank. I recommend most of the time that you go with a local bank. Big national banks are great. Maybe you're a big fan of Navy Federal Credit Union or USAA. I recommend that you go with one of my lenders and we go with a local bank. And there's several that I have here that I recommend. And if you give me a call, I'll be happy to put you in touch with them. It's just to get the conversation started. And you can call that loan officer and you can start basically a pre-application. You can work through some numbers and kind of get a good idea of where you want to go. They'll talk about what you think your FICO score is, and they can do this without doing a credit check. And once you're ready to do a full application, they're going to ask for a lot more documentation. They'll run a credit check, and then they're going to give you a real number of how much you are approved for. And then you have a good idea, hey, that I want to spend this much. Am I actually approved? Yeah, the bank says they'll give me the money. Great. All right, continuing on. We're still talking about number 2, which is money. So we said we had figured out the budget. We've talked to the loan officer, and we've now gotten a pre-approval letter from the loan officer for a certain amount of money. That's awesome. The next thing we want to do is make sure that we have the cash on hand to actually get to the closing table in this deal. Because even if you're a VA buyer with no money down, you're still going to need to spend some money in the application process or in the purchase process. There is some money that you have to spend. The first thing you're going to need to have on hand is an earnest money deposit. That is a good faith deposit that you make as the buyer to the seller that says, hey, I really intend to buy this house. And if I found and breach the contract, I break the contract, you keep the money and we don't go forward. On the other hand, if we do buy the house, that money goes towards the purchase price. Hey, that's great. And if you're a zero money down type of person, like a VA loan, you've put this money down and at the closing table, it gets credited back to you. So that's how that works. Great. How much is that earnest money deposit? It depends what kind of price range you're in. In general, let's just say maybe right around 1% of the purchase price. So if you're buying a $300,000 house, $3,000, writing a check for $3,000 is a pretty good earnest money deposit. If you write a check for just $500 or $1,000, although legally sufficient, the seller might look at that as you're not really interested. You're just kind of throwing a number out there. There is a chance that they may not find that as a sufficient earnest money deposit for them to take their property off the market, to go into further negotiations with you to get to the home sale. So if they say that's not enough, you're going to need to put more in. And that's part of that negotiation process. Again, I'm recommending that you have approximately 1% of the purchase price for an earnest money deposit and have that in a checking account ready to go. The second thing you're going to need to spend some cash on is once you get into the process and you're under contract, you're going to have to spend some money on the home inspection. So the home inspection, it can run you anywhere from $300 to $500 or more, depending on the size of the house. And that is money that the buyer spends. You're going to pay that either a check or a credit card to a home inspector, and they're going to inspect the house and give you a report. Whether you buy it or not, you have bought that report, and that's what that money is for. So you can put that on a credit card. I highly recommend you squirrel away the money, have that set aside in an account so that you're ready to pay it. So it's not something you're putting on credit, just in case, because you never know. You might see something you don't like and you back out. You don't get the money back. That's in for the home inspection. Here in Virginia, we're also the #1 area for termite and moisture damage, and so we want to have a moisture termite inspection. And that's going to run you maybe $100, usually a little bit less. And again, they're going to give you a report, and that report is usually yours to spend. It can be spent by the seller. It's negotiable, but typically you should plan to spend that, and you should budget $100 for that inspection. The next important thing you need to do, again in money, down payment. Now, if you're a zero money down, you don't have to worry about that. All you have is closing costs. We'll get to that in a second. If you're an FHA buyer, 3.5% to 5%, you want to have that money squirreled away. So at a $300,000 house, you're going to want to have $10,000 to $15,000 in cash for the down payment. If you're a conventional loan, typically you want to put down 20%, and so that in that case it'd be $60,000. You can put down less. There are options to do that, and we'll talk about PMI some other day, but there is an option in a conventional loan to pay less. In general, you should have that money set aside in a checking account, again, for your deposit. So you got an earnest money deposit. I said deposit, I meant down payment. So you have an earnest money deposit, you've got your home inspection, your moisture termite inspection, and then the down payment. The last thing in there is closing costs. And the closing costs can be points on the loan. You're going to have lawyer fees. You're going to have an appraisal fee. You're going to have a survey. There's title fees. There's local taxes. There's quite a few things that are on that settlement statement that you're going to have to pay for. If you budget, let's say 3% of the purchase price for closing fees, you're not wrong. It can be substantial. Sometimes those closing costs can be financed into the loan in certain loan products. Not a discussion for today, but that can happen. The other thing to consider is that there are times when you can negotiate that seller pays for some of those closing costs. Again, another discussion for another day. So what did we say? We talked about money. We said we had to budget. We had to figure out what that number was, figure out the pre-approval letter, and then we needed to set aside some money. We needed the money for the earnest money deposit. We needed money for a home inspection, a termite moisture inspection, the money for the down payment, and then money for closing costs. That's what we need. That's number 2, figuring out the money. So far we've talked about the first 3 things. The first one was figuring out your why. What's the point? Number 2 was all the things about money. And number 3, we're now going to start shopping for a house. So we need to figure out where we want to live and what kind of home we're looking for. And then we can go in and look through the MLS, the multiple listing service, and set up a search. And we'll put in all of those different factors so that we can then get a report every morning of all the homes that are on the market that are in your price range and in that geographic region that meet all your criteria, so that we can figure out which ones may or may not be suitable. Once we have that, we then set up showings, and we set up a time to go take a look at the house in person. That appointment may be anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. And at the end of it, we're going to make a decision. Either it's a yes, a no, or a maybe. And from there, we're going to make a follow-on decisions. For today's discussion, it's a yes. So now what we're going to do is we're going to make an offer. And when we make the offer, I'll put together the paperwork, you review it, you sign it, and it names the price and the terms for the offer to purchase the property. At that point, we enter into negotiations with the seller, and the seller either says yes or no, or maybe if you said this, and they'll counter offer, in which case we can either say yes to the counter or we go back and forth, and that's the process of negotiations. The important thing about negotiations is to remember is that it's not just a this price, that price, this price, that price. Negotiating is basically a three-dimensional problem. You've got price, you got terms, you got this term, you got a date. There are all sorts of different variables that you can change in the course of the negotiation, and that's important to remember. So it's not just here's the price, yes or no. There's a process for getting to yes. And if you want the house, we may have to give up either a price or a term in order to get what we want. And the seller may be doing the same thing. Assuming we negotiate, we get to the point where we say yes, all right, now we're in the process of getting from contract to close, as we say. First thing we're going to do is we're going to schedule that home inspection. Typically anywhere from 7 to 10 days we have for a window to do that home inspection. I will give you several home inspectors that I say are worthy of consideration. You will pick one of those or another one of your choice, and we can set those up, and we set up a time to go see the house with the inspector, go through and see everything, basically take a look at the systems and the upkeep of the home. So when we do that home inspection, we're going to spend several hours at the house, possibly even with the sellers there. And at the end of it, the home inspector, he's going to pull up his laptop, he's going to have most of the report done, he's going to walk through us and say, hey, here's the good, the bad, and the ugly as far as this home, and then he's going to draw that up as a PDF and he's going to email it to you. Once that's done, share it with me, and we go over that and we determine what we want to ask for in either repair list or price concession, or maybe a combination of the two in order to continue with the transaction. Once that's established, we've removed the home inspection contingency and we continue on in the process. The next step is probably the appraisal. And at this point, the lender, your lender that you're borrowing the money from, is going to order the appraisal. The way the appraisal works is the lender will order the appraisal from an appraisal company. They will come out, take a look at the house, measure up the comparable sales, take a look at the house, and then determine what number is a fair value for that house. And what they're doing is they're assessing the risk for the bank. And does the bank see this as a suitable investment for them to give you the loan so that you can buy the house? If the numbers match and the appraised value is better than the contract price, we continue on with purchase contract. If it comes in low, we then continue with more negotiations. And we can talk about some of the nuances on that some other time. In conjunction with the appraisal, at the same time, we now might be ordering all the documents for the homeowners association or the condo association. And those are things that you have to receive. You get 3 days to review it, say yes or no, and then we continue on. You also may order a survey. You don't have to order a survey in most cases. I do recommend that usually for most people, you do get the survey. Just like the home inspection, it's a good idea. So then as we approach the closing date, we're going to get an estimate and then a final document where it talks about all the closing costs so we can see the exact number breakdown of how much it's going to cost to complete this transaction. All right, so we're clear to close. It's closing day. That's great. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the lawyer's office. We're going to sit down. We're going to sign go over the documents, make sure they're right, and we're going to sign them. In the old days, we would all have gone to the same title company, all sat at the same table, and signed the documents right there in front of each other. Nowadays, well, here in the Tidewater area, we don't have to do that. You can use a title company or a lawyer. I recommend we go with lawyers, and we can just show up, sign them on our side, and they communicate with the other parties' lawyers, and they make the documents work digitally across across email. They figure it all out, and so we can close independently. We don't have to be even at the same time. The other side can do theirs at 9 a.m. and we can do ours at 4 p.m. It's all good. As long as all the numbers work, it's a legal document and we're done. The last step, you closed, is you get the keys and you move in. Congratulations, you just bought a house. So there it is. That's how we buy a house here in Norfolk, Virginia. So it's 5 things. First, we're going to figure out what's our why, what's the point. Number 2, we're going to figure out the money. 3, we're going to set up a search and look at houses. 4, we're going to make an offer, get under contract. And 5 is contract to close, where we go through the process. And that's how it works. If you have any questions, please give me a call. Remember, I am here for you. I am your advocate. I am your real estate wingman. All right, talk soon.